Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome back to this broadcast. We are back again this week. Last week we had a time off, but we're back now and we want to just go straight into the broadcast, and we would be looking at the continuation of the session we had on the power of precepts. As a reminder, we are focusing on the theme, which is keeping it simple. That is, embracing simplicity in our lives. Now, a fortnight ago, we were talking about the power of precepts, how that precepts are foundational principles, or if you like, the first principles. God focused on this, and as we look at scriptures, we see that God does not deal in the, if you like, innovation of ideas, as it were. Rather, he looks at the original ideas. He himself being the first to be on the scene. I take that from the scriptures that talks about God being the Alpha and the Omega. You see, God, this is an interesting thing I will see in scriptures. He says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending. Meaning, look, if I state a position right from the start, I maintain it. It doesn't change even by the time we get to the end. And that's why God is constant. God is unchanging. And a lot may be happening around God, but God remains the same because He is the Alpha and the Omega. His position at the beginning is unchanging all through times, all through seasons, even right to the ending. That is God's position. And therefore, you could say that God is really the master of simplicity. He does not need to keep creating something He has created. He created it once in truth. And because He has created it in truth, that thing becomes self-sustaining. An example is what we see in scriptures. And when you look at Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, you see God's principle there. He would create a tree and put the seed of the tree in the fruit of that tree, so that once the creation is done once, then that entity becomes self-sustaining because the seed of that tree is in its fruit. So God can remain the Alpha of that tree and the Omega of it. It can remain the beginning and the ending of it. So God does not need to create orange twice. He creates orange and says, well, you stay orange. Now, if someone becomes so intelligent and say, I'm not satisfied with that, and I will start to change an original creation, then the onus is on you to maintain it. You have to manage that complexity. God says, well, I'm not going to stop you because you share a creative or the creative essence with me. However, whatever you create out of a first principle, you will have to manage. Whatever you innovate out of an original idea, you have to sustain. And therein comes one of the attributes of God, if you like, one of the names of God. Where a name means attribute, it means character description. So God is called the Father, which means anything God creates, He sustains. So because He creates only in the first principle, then God can remain a father to that thing perpetually. When you create something out of the first principle, then you become the father of that thing and you have to maintain it. A father maintains, a father sustains. So, and in order to simplify our lives, God wants us to be a father like He is, or fathers like He is, meaning we stay with Him in His original creation so that He can remain the father of all, and we're just sitting and resting in His fatherhood. It means we're not necessarily innovating out of the first principle. Rather, we are leveraging on the first principle and we are deriving the maximum benefit there is in the first principle creation, in that which comes out of His precept. Now, the other time we're saying that we will explore that thought we began further, and this is just you can call it a simple elaboration on what we started to talk about. But if you go back to scriptures and start to look at everything just to demonstrate how that this is God's position, he started to talk about a lot of things. He was trying to create a nation. The human race haven't departed from the original state that He designed for them. He wanted to then he initiated a return program or a remedial program, which is meant to take man back to that original state. So you will see a lot of things that God did. And God wanted man to discover that outside of that original state, the only thing you would ever have is malfunctioning and a reduction in capacity until such a state where man meets total weakness, a total loss of capacity. That is a state you call death. And that will mean God is being true to His word. He told Adam, said, do not eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because the day you do so, you will die. You will think, why wouldn't you want me to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Well, God was telling Adam, you are created in a state where all you know is good. Just like we normally say God is good. You could also say that Adam was good. As a matter of fact, everything that God created had that same attribute. They came out of God and they shared that attribute. Everything was good. Adam too was good. But the moment Adam departed from that state, he lost the essence of goodness. So much so that when someone was trying to impress Jesus by saying, good master, he was greeting Jesus, said, good master. And Jesus told him, you don't even know what the concept of goodness means because you've lost it. Jesus was speaking factually, but I'm not sure the man quite got it. The man would have thought, well, how do you mean? I do all these nice things, so surely I am a good man. Little did they know that goodness wasn't in just doing good things, nice things, commendable things. It's a state of being where, let me describe this like when you look at your switch, the light bulb switch, you have on or off. Now, anything that is capable of going on and off certainly does not have a singular state. you have duality of nature. It means at times you may be on, at other times you may be off. In man's original creation, it was designed to have just a singular state, not off and on. It was just either totally on or totally off, meaning it would know goodness only and would not know the other side of goodness at all. So it was entirely on a particular state. You can extend that by saying he knew only righteousness and did not know the other side of righteousness. You could also say he knew only wellness, health. He did not know sickness. He knew only limitlessness. He did not know limitation. So it means that Adam in his original state could only exist in one form, in just one state of being. That was what God had told him. Listen, stay here, stay in this state. The opposite of this will make you acquire duality of nature, which makes you unstable. At times, you will be healthy. Other times, you will be unhealthy. At times, you will do some good things, but other times, you flip and do some wicked things, terrible things. So that man, when Jesus said, hey, you don't even know the concept of goodness, you don't know what that means anymore. The man will have, he tried to argue with Jesus. He was saying, oh, I'll show you that I know a bit of goodness. And he was trying to highlight his profile to Jesus, saying, oh, I do this, I do that, I do this. So what else do I lack? And Jesus just smiled. You know, when someone is talking out of ignorance and total lack of awareness, the knowledgeable person can only smile. You would only smile and say, well, okay, let's bear with you for the time being until you come to that awareness, that realization that you are not what you claim to be. All right. So this is, I'm just explaining what God meant when he said, look, just stay in singularity of nature. We don't want you to acquire duality of nature. And once man had acquired that state, God wanted to return him to what he was. But you see, that was permanent damage. And God was not going to try to repair it. So the purpose of God's redemption is not an attempt to repair what was damaged, because you couldn't repair it. It was damaged at a fundamental level. It was a fundamental corruption. It was a principled, I may even call it first principle corruption, first degree corruption. So what will God do? It will be a replacement. That's why the redemption is not an attempt to repair the damaged human nature. It was God's program to replace God's damaged nature with the original, so that man could operate again meaningfully and in actuality in that state of first principle. Man, in his best form, is only designed to operate in the first principle. Another scripture that may explain this, which, you know, when I first read it, I didn't quite understand it, but I think it's starting to make sense now. It was Solomon that somehow discovered this in spite of his exploits. He was saying, I've looked all over and I've made a discovery that God has made man perfect, but they have sought many inventions. And you wonder, what is Solomon saying here? Is it trying to say that we should not create the car or the helicopter or the ship? No. He was explaining this same thing, that God made man perfect. Perfection is the capacity to stay in one state. Perfection, you can look at it from the idea of something that is perpendicular. You remember in geometry, you have a perpendicular. When something stands perpendicular, it means it starts at a right angle, 90 degrees. Yes. And stay in that state means it's a vertical state in relative to the to a horizontal line. Okay. Now that is perfect. It means that thing maintains one position. It's in state 1 and 1 alone. It's not oscillating from 1 to 0 and 0 to 1 and back to 0 and back to 1. No, it stays in one state. So he said, God has made man perfect, but they have found a way to oscillate, to go change position, 1 to 0, 0 to 1, maybe now from 1 to -1, and all of that, everything in between. They found many inventions. And you say, look at the distance between 1 and 0, between something that is horizontal and something that is vertical in a perpendicular state. There's quite a bit of angle to go. It's everything between 0 and 90 degrees. I mean, there's quite a lot of inventions between that. That is a multiplicity of states. Man could find himself in multiplicity of states. And I'm trying to just use geometry to explain this, but I think you get the point. That brings complication. So complication is not proof of advancement. No, it's actually proof of damage that's happened to something that is otherwise designed to be perfect. That's why sometimes when we use examples like, if you have your car, you want your car to function for you all the time. You don't want suddenly to get to the car and you start the ignition and the car says, I'm not functioning today. And that happens to be the day that you have an urgent appointment, a time-bound appointment. I think you'll be upset, to say the least. And then the day you just need to step out casually, the car starts and function, and the engine sounds so lovely. Well, you're going to come to a position very quickly that this car is not reliable. I cannot depend on this car. This car is not trustworthy. That's exactly what happened to man. By departing from that unique state of being to duplicity of nature, where he now can be good and then sometimes can be evil. That is knowledge of good and evil. It just really means a dual state. You could even say that it became double-minded, double state. Well, a double state entity, right? Maybe that's what James was also saying, that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. You don't know on what state it will be at any particular time. Whereas, look at how we describe God. The Lord is good. Just that. The Lord is good. The Lord is good. Just one state. So, and this is really what God wanted for man, because don't forget that God created man out of himself to share the same state of being, the same essence. That's what it meant when God said, and that's what it still means, let us make man in our image, in our state, in our essence. functioning according to our likeness. All right. Therefore, everything we will say rests on this foundation. In fact, if you look at the words of Jesus, it would only make sense when you look at it from this foundation. So, let's pick just about anything that he said. So when God said, I know you are Bible scholars. I just want to pick just an example of what he said. If you look at Matthew chapter 5 to chapter 7, where it was talking about, we call that the Beatitudes, right? So he said, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. They are in the singular state of mercy, well, and perpetually so. So what will their experience be? Just that, mercy. Okay. Another one said, we don't want you to say yes and on the same matter say yes and another time say no. That is, we just want truth. So, and don't try to convince us that you mean yes when you really mean no, or when you are actually not capable of maintaining that yes. So we're saying, don't vow, don't swear, not by anything at all. He said it is sufficient that you simply say, no, I cannot, or yes, I can. He said anything other than that is inspired by that evil nature that oscillates between a state of perfection and imperfection. It comes out of duality of nature. Now, and I asked this question, the people that Jesus was talking to at the time, just imagine that they were like people like you and I. Were they really capable of doing what Jesus was saying to them? The simple answer, the honest answer to would be no. And Jesus was well aware of that. So he was telling them, he said, see, there is something I must do, and I cannot wait until that is done. By that, it meant you still have a nature that cannot do what I'm saying, and I'm aware of it. And I have a work to do, not to repair the nature you currently have, but to replace it. By that, it meant, look, and when the Son of Man is lifted up, then I will draw all men to myself. Then you will know in that day that I am the one that the Father has sent. He was saying those things to them, that it is a necessity. It was saying he must go to the cross. He did not say, I must be beaten. He did not say, I must be hated. Even though those were part of the package, but there was everything, that replacement was hinged on Jesus going to the cross. That is, he must experience that kind of death which will end that duality of nature. And so he did. So his death made sense, and he knew that until that happened, yes, they could receive the instruction, but they couldn't abide in that instruction. He knew it. So when we talk about the redemption, we should understand it from this angle, that it was an absolute necessity in the mind of God because that was the means by which the exchange, the replacement of the nature that man had inherited since he stepped out of that single state of being into that duality of nature. That duality of nature is actually what we refer to as the corruption or the fall from a singular state, a perfect state. Think about, just remember perpendicular. Man was created perpendicularly and then he fell. Think about it, he fell. And God said, we must return you back to just one state. And what you had become that is capable of falling and sometimes attempting to stand and falling is no good. We need to remove it and replace it with what you had before that was incapable of, that was just one state. And God's replacement for man became Christ. It would just be the restoration of God's spirit inside man, which is actually called the spirit of truth. What is truth? Original principles or precept. So what man was replaced with is that spirit of precept, the spirit of truth, the spirit that functions in the first principle. It feels like we've gone full circle, but say that that's the wisdom of God. Just a return. And it was not so much of the volume of actions, it was the restoration of a state of being. That state of being may not do much in a day. Maybe there's only one action, or that action will have been done from the position of perfection, that perpendicular state. So it was not so much, frankly speaking, it was not so much of the volume of activities, of actions, or even behaviors. It's not a change of behavior. It was a change of state. The state becomes the bedrock of the actions and behaviors. So God wasn't attempting to change our behaviors. He was changing who we had become. That duality, that being that's capable of operating in a dual state. And herein is the essence of simplicity, because simplicity is hinged on maintaining just a singular state, staying in a unique state of being. We can pick any example, but fundamentally it comes out of that foundation. And I would say I'd rather keep it simple. You can actually find the examples yourself. If we stay with the first principle, it doesn't matter what example then build on it. There'll be consistency. So, sounds like a good place to stop. Thank you for joining us again tonight. God bless you and see you next time. God bless. Bye for now.